All right, recording started.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Southern California Splunk User Group September edition. My name is Sean Ruthier. We have David Urban and Jon Nussbaum on the call as well. Jon is going to be giving a pretty great talk this session. The user group kind of moving forward should be at least a quarterly cadence. So apologies for having a few months in between from the last one to this one. So yeah, let's next slide, please. So like I said, Jon is going to be presenting on workload management. I know as a user that's recently moving to 8.1, it's going to be pretty important to our use cases to get workload management off the ground. And I know because the end of life for 8.0 is coming up as well, I felt it was a pretty good way to kind of get everybody's feet wet on this new feature in Splunk and to see how great it would be for all of our organizations. At the end of the user group, we'll have an open discussion. So after Jon presents, so for anybody that has any Splunk questions, we have a couple of Splunkers on the chat. If you have any successes or challenges that you've had recently, feel free to share those as well. And hopefully we all can help you out if you had some challenges or be pretty envious with your successes. And then, as always, if you are currently hiring or you're currently seeking alternative employment, of course, with discretion, feel free to let us know if you're hiring. We'll blast that out to the user group. And if you're seeking, then we can discreetly get you connected with the people that are hiring too. Next slide. So the next user group meeting, still trying to get with the quarterly cadence. We would not have it in October because it would kind of align with Splunk Conf. So due to that, we'll postpone it till November. Another thing that to keep your eyes out on is upcoming Splunk events, because not all of the Splunk events are through user groups or Conf or B-Sides or even the Splunk Lives, but Splunk does offer virtual sessions and virtual briefs on various topics. So, of course, how to get started with open telemetry. It's a pretty compelling topic. Conf is coming up, like I said. And then, unfortunately, this session was only being offered in the GMT time zone. So if you wanted to wake up at 11:30 a.m., from what I've heard of this specific workshop, it's actually a very compelling workshop and definitely worth your time. Like I mentioned, 8.0 is becoming end of life October 22nd. If you haven't upgraded already, certainly be sure to look to at least make the jump from 7 to 8 in that amount of time. Of course, Python version 2 is being depreciated from version 7 to version 8. So there are a number of apps, and I'm sure all of your environments that need to get at least evaluated for the Python code. Worst case scenario, you might be able to run the Python 2 code in a compatibility mode. But ideally, upgrading is the best course of action.
And then just to jump in, if you don't mind, Sean, this is Jon.
Not at all.
So everybody, for Conf 21, it is virtual only. That was just announced by our marketing team, I think last week. There was a charge for the virtual admission. I believe it was $250, but that's been completely waived. So Conf 21 this year, virtual, is completely free. So if you haven't signed up already, just go to conf.splunk.com and you should be able to sign up. So thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, great information. Thank you, Jon. And yeah, next slide. We do have a Slack channel. It has been, if you go to the SoCal user group, you won't see any messages currently because the Slack user group channel is a free channel, so it only displays the last 10,000 messages across all of the user group Slack. So if you want to start a discussion, a number of us have that user group starred and with notifications turned on. So feel free to ask questions, and a number of us can get back to you and hopefully answer those questions. And like I mentioned earlier, we do have a YouTube channel. Jon has given some previous briefs in the user group, and John McGovern, also on the call, has given a brief, and I've given a session or two as well. All of those are available on the YouTube channel. So if you want to, at your own pace, feel free to go check those out. And with that said, Jon, you are up next.
Here, I'll stop sharing, John, and you can jump in.
Okay, sounds good. All right. I think this is live. Can everybody see the screen okay?
Yep, can see it.
All right, awesome. So yeah, I'll be going over workload management today. So thanks everybody for joining. I know these last several months and even year plus has been crazy. So yeah, appreciate you all taking the time out of your day, and hopefully we could get you learning something here today. So with any Splunk environment, some common challenges that we see across the board is unpredictability in searches and resource utilization within the environment. You know, if you're new to administering an environment, or if you've administered an environment for a while, you know that users at any given time can sort of pop in and just plug in any kind of search. And this can be detrimental to resources and user experience. And so we haven't really had good mechanisms in the past for providing guardrails against noisy neighbors. And so, yeah, workload management is going to look to help in that department. So, yeah, with some apps that are available on Splunk Base, some of these have searches packaged in that take a lot of resources, users jumping in, doing all time, real time, and so on. And so like the worst case scenario with bad user behavior is that we've seen it impact data ingestion. So if they're consuming too much resource on the search side, it can quite literally cause a log jam of data coming into Splunk and cause data to be dropped, or other issues to arise, which is not good. So it's definitely something that we've set out to solve for. So yeah, the goal of workload management is really to be able to provide the ability to prioritize resource allocation to critical workloads. So that being search and ingest. And then within the search and ingest tiers, you know, we can segregate out or make different pools, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But the ability to carve out different resource groups from within those critical workloads. And a goal of that is to guarantee resource allocation for the right function. So whether it's ingest or search. And so how do we do that? We'll be able to classify a set of resource reservation classes or priorities for different search workloads. We'll be able to set boundaries on resource usage by their server class. And then we'll be able to take action on runaway search jobs. So if there's something that's taken a bunch of resource, we can put the clamp down on it. We can, you know, we can move it to a different set of resources, essentially, so that it's not impacting other people's performance. So instead of killing the job and emailing the user like we had sort of done in the past, now we can throttle it or downsize it, if you will, from a resource standpoint. And then, yeah, with any Splunk function, we're going to need to be able to monitor it and report on it. So what does a Splunk environment look like? I I'm glad we're all not sitting in traffic and we're able to sit behind a computer screen. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going on from a search perspective in the environment. So anything from somebody jumping on, doing some crazy index equals star. Maybe there's a lot of save scheduled searches. Maybe there's important VIPs that need access to their data now. Maybe there's some folks that haven't taken training and this is their first time into Splunk and they're not efficient or they don't have good search practice yet. And all sorts of other users that are using the system, and it just becomes sort of a big traffic jam. And there's all sorts of different skill levels, and there's all sorts of requirements. So how do we, going forward, set up different lanes of resources, if you will, so that we can allocate the right resources to the right folks? And so this is what workload management seeks to accomplish here. Sort of be able to set up the carpool lane, if you will, for more critical workloads or more important business use cases and so forth. So, security analysts that need to build out stuff in real time, or they're going to get priority. Folks that are doing, index equals star, lower priority. Folks that don't need their data, they could belong to the general pool and not take resources away from some of these other more important folks. Just build this out here. Okay, so how do we get workload management? So if you're a Splunk Cloud customer, workload management is available within the current environment that you guys have. Should be on 8.x. Workload management comes as part of the install. So you should be able to log in and start configuring it. We've configured all the underlying resources and everything's set and ready to go. If you're on premise or you're in a public cloud bringing your own license, you should be on at least Splunk version 8.x. Workload management was introduced in 7.2, but there's going to be a lack of features and functions within workload management for 7.2 and 7.3. And because those versions are coming end of life, it would be recommended to get up to at least 8.0, 8.1 to start with workload management. From an operating system perspective, we support RHEL, CentOS, Ubuntu, and SUSE, and the versions there are printed out on the screen. There is a requirement for either systemd or C groups with those versions, and these are required to be able to manage the resources, the underlying resources, and get those over to Splunk so that then we can incorporate workload management from those resources. And there's a pretty good detailed list of documentations within our doc site for configuring workload management, and even some of the systemd or C groups configurations that are required to get workload management off the ground. So yeah, feel free to check out the doc site or ping me on Slack or something. I'm happy to relay that information over. Okay, so now what I'll do is pivot over into a demo environment, and we'll go over workload management and some of its capabilities here. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing this and pivot over to my other machine here.
That call out to a user finding the map command on Reddit spoke to me at a spiritual level.
Yeah. And they also appear in nightmares from time to time. Okay, so looks like that pulled up good. All right, so this is a lab environment, so it might be a little slower than what everybody's used to, so I do apologize for that. I'm cheap on my resources, go figure, but we'll just go ahead and jump right in. So this is the main launch landing page for Splunk. To get into workload management once it's configured. So if you're Splunk Cloud, workload management is going to work right out of the box. On-prem, there's a few things that you have to do with systemd to get it all working. But once that's all sorted out, from within Splunk, you go to settings and then workload management. And so the landing page here, there's really three main focus areas. So there's admission rules, workload pools, and then the rules for workload. So I'll go over and I'll give a quick example for each one of these categories. So I think one of the biggest value adds for workload management right out of the gate is the admission rule. So what this allows you to do is create a rule that when we see a certain condition, we just go ahead and kill the search or prevent the search from even running, which has been it's been requested, and it's been in the backlog for quite some time. But essentially what that looks like, bring up a tab here. So if I'm a user and I'm logging in and it's my first time using Splunk, and I've heard that like index equals star is the way to go. I'm gonna punch that in, hit enter, and then what I get back is please don't use index equals star. So right away it's like Splunk doesn't even execute the search. If you try to go look for job inspector, it's not even there. Quite literally, when you hit the search button, the first part of the code is going to look for the condition of the search through the workload management code block. And if this exists as a condition to exempt, or it's in the admission rule set, it's just going to go ahead and kill the search right away and give us back this message. So this is great because we can start to craft certain things in here that sort of go against our acceptable use policy for Splunk. So that could be index equals star, that could be, certain things that we're looking for from a condition perspective. And if it's ever seen right off the bat, it's just going to kill the search, no questions asked. The user gets this message, and they'll have to refine their search before proceeding. And what we see is being successful in the field for these messages is a link to some sort of central knowledge repository. So whether it be Confluence or some other central knowledge space, where users can get some more information about either the acceptable use policy or best practices, or, hey, why did my search just not work? They can get a little bit more information. So if you do have the folks that just for some reason will not take training, they think they're the smartest, at least they can be fed a link to go find some more information, so they're not left just sort of just hanging. So yeah, so that is the admission rule. Pretty powerful stuff. Yeah, the configuration features for it, let's see here. So you've got your condition, you can choose when to schedule it, action, filter the search. I'm sure as we iterate on workload management, there will be more capabilities for these different rule sets. So pretty simple there. In terms of configuring it, very effective. We can just filter out all the known bad stuff right away. So awesome. Moving along to the other pillar in workload management, which is the workload pools. This is the configuration for how we carve out resources within Splunk. So the three different categories here, search, ingest, and miscellaneous. Search and ingest, one of the most important features to Splunk, and then miscellaneous can be used for things like data acquisition or other types of activities that Splunk may be doing. So we have that miss category there. And then from a search pool perspective, we need to define a default workload pool and assign it some resources, and then also some other pools that will use depending on conditions and other types of rules that we're going to apply to the environment. So for this one here, the default pool is weighted pretty high. It's got over 50% CPU available for it. It's got a high memory limit, and it is the default. And then for this lab environment, I created a few test pools with lower CPU. This is helpful to show the impact on the search that winds up landing in one of these pools that's not the default one. So we'll go ahead and give a live example here in a second.
Hey, John, there's a couple questions in chat.
Oh, sure. Yeah, let me take a pause, open up chat here. Okay, so would that criteria also stop an index equals? Yes. So if you do a wildcarded search for an index, that should work. And we can test that out really quick. Just want to make sure I'm not. We do like an index equals star.
Well, I meant more on the terms of like if you just have index equals star, would that stop a search where you're using a star as a precursor to the index instantiation in search?
Oh, so like index equals star.
Yeah,
like main, something like that, where you're.
Oh no, just leaving it as index equals star, because at Blizzard there are certain indexes that are notated as like dev underscore authentication or prod underscore authentication. So what an index equals, and the user search practices are sometimes users will do index equals star underscore authentication to get all of the authentication logging. Would this criteria kind of end at the index equals star, or would it take the whole index value into consideration before stopping the search?
Yeah, good question. So I can do something like index equals star AIN for like main, wildcarding out that first character. Let's see. Wildcard values cannot contain other characters. So it looks like it's.
So in this case, if you leave it just as index equals star, and then in the search you do star ain, would that still kill it?
Let's see. And I think there's certain requirements around the conditions here. Let's see. Yeah, so there are, yeah, here we go. So specify condition for this rule. The format is type equal value with option and or not. So the valid types are app, role, user, index, search type, search mode, search time range. So I think one of the other questions that I saw was, can it be tied to time ranges? So definitely there, the search time range would apply there. But I don't believe core SPL gets picked up for the condition. So if somebody's doing a string or something like that, we can't pick that off as part of the predicate or the condition. It's got to be just these very specific fields with values. But I would suspect, yeah, going forward, they're going to expand the scope of what the allowable input is for the condition here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what some of the other questions are. So what happens if a user doesn't define an index? Will it default to default indices it's able to search? Yeah, so I think that will be picked up by role-based access. So if we just did a, let's see. So I specified an index there. If I just say source type equal, we'll just throw one of these source types in here. Yeah, so interesting. So without specifying an index, it's getting, this rule is getting tripped here.
What's your default index you can view on your actual?
Yeah, good question. So let's see. So this is admin. So the indexes, and that's roles. Let's see. Okay, so yeah, it's just admin for the role. Let me go to, yeah, this is interesting. I am not sure why it's not showing all the indexes here. Yeah, again, this is sort of an interesting lab environment. So I wonder if I have some bad configurations going on. Hmm. Yeah, does anybody know why I wouldn't see indexes here? That's strange.
Can the default admin role be changed for what it can see? My thought was the default admin role had access to all indexes and you could not change that, at least through the UI.
Yeah, let's see. Is there another, let's see if there's another role here. I just did, yeah, that's really strange. Yeah, capabilities, but there's just no indexes. You know, maybe there's no, I've created a few. Yeah, it must be in an interesting state, this environment. Usually indexes would show up and you'd be able to include it or not. So yeah, I can't
Cool.
quite I could try.
No big deal, John. I can test it and find out.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm wondering if I have this set up in this environment too. This is my other lab machine. I don't have this one set up. So yeah, I'll run some tests too, Jeff, and get back to you on that one.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, and then let's see, what else do we have in chat here? Okay, awesome. So let me continue on. So we went over the pools and how these are configured. Yeah, pretty straightforward. You can add different pools and sculpt the different resources and align them to the different categories, whether it's a search, ingest, or MISC. And then yeah, you'll always need a default pool. So if you don't have one, you'll need to create that there. And so yeah, with these different pools, we can go ahead and start creating workload rules that align to these. So an example here, we can add workload rule and we can create a name. And then the predicate here is similar to the admission rules. We have certain fields and values that we have to work with. So it can be the app, which is what Splunk app it's running in, if it's search by default, or maybe a custom app, the role, the user, the index, the search type, whether it's accelerated or ad hoc, search mode, search time range, and then runtime is something that is in the workload rules here, but not in the admission rules. And so runtime is how long the search is taking. So as soon as the search executes, there's a counter to know how long the search's runtime is. So yeah, we could fill that out. Could schedule it, and then take an action. So what do we want to do once the condition is met? So we can place it in a certain search pool. We can abort the search altogether. We can display the user a message, or move it to a different resource pool. And then we can create a message here that gets displayed for the user. So I created one, created a rule here called slow, and the condition is index equal internal and the runtime is greater than 10 seconds. Move it to the workload pool of test, and it's going to be always on. So I'll go ahead and run this search, and we'll go look through a few different things so that you know what to look for when you start rolling this out in your environment. So yeah, what I'll do is bring up searching reporting. We'll do an index equal internal. And I'll just go over the last 15 minutes here. And what I want to do while that's running is we'll go ahead and watch systemctl, which is the command to link into systemd. And we'll just do a status on Splunk D service. Let me see if I can do something like this. Okay, so we'll go ahead and run this over the last 15 minutes. And so I think if you look carefully, I may need to bump it up to 60 minutes or so. But we should have seen a search in there, search ID 42443. And then if I go to job inspect 42443, so the SID was seen in systemd, so we caught it in there. And if I go back to job inspector and go to search job properties, the default workload pool is still default. So it ran and didn't get moved or anything. It's still in default. Now, if I open this up to say something like 24 hours. So as it's running here, we see the search here. I can get fancy and tail this workload monitor.log. And so what you can see here is workload monitor log moved this search here 42444, which must be the search here. I can just inspect it really quick. Yeah, 42444. So it moved this search from default over to test. And if you can tell, it's dramatically slowed down in terms of the number of events that it's able to return. So it's pretty speedy, and then it moved, and then it's a little slower because it only has a fraction of the resources that the default search pool has. So what this means is for longer running searches that we don't need to swamp resources with, that can afford to take a longer time to run, we can craft those different pools accordingly so that we can always keep sort of that express lane open for some of the more important workloads to be able to access those resources. So a huge bump in Splunk's capabilities to be able to balance those resources or allow you to configure those resource subscriptions more effectively as it's seen best fit for your organization. So this thing will complete. I'm a little impatient, so I'll just go ahead and stop it. And then once it's finished, we can go to job inspect, and if you open up the search properties and go down to the bottom, you'll see that it was moved by the workload management over to the test pool, and then it shows you what pool it's in. So I can make this a little bigger. So yeah, workload management doing its job. Yeah, after 10 seconds, it just went ahead and moved it over, and yeah, that keeps those valuable resources open for other more important searches. So we'll go ahead and close that. Yeah, there's some capabilities within workload management from a role-based access control perspective, whereby users can select which pool the search gets executed from. So if you know that there's a search that may take a while to complete and you're totally fine with it performing slow, you can go ahead and select that resource pool here. Same is true for actively running jobs. So if there's a job that you want to change, let's see here, edit job settings. We can go ahead and change that here. Some of these have already completed, so I can't change it, but yeah, if they're live running jobs and they're taking a while, or you notice the users are maybe not as important as some others, or maybe they're more important, you can shift around the jobs to match the pools that best match the user or what they're trying to accomplish. So it's a good way to manually manage if you're in a time where maybe there's a P1 incident and there's a bunch of people logging in and doing searches, and you're getting some complaints that Splunk's slow. Instead of terminating searches, you can just shuffle them around so that things balance out a little better. Okay, so let's see, I think that covers the workload management sort of configuration, and then creating some rules and then showing how that works. It wouldn't be a feature in Splunk if it doesn't have some sort of reporting and monitoring wrapped around it. So within monitoring console, we have the ability. Let me take a quick pause, check chat, and see if there's anything before we get into the monitoring piece here. Okay, so let's see here. Michael asks, will the global limits that could cause finalization of a search because it ran longer than whatever is configured still apply after a search was moved into a slower pool? Will the global limits that could cause finalization?
I mean, things like the quotas, CPU quotas and stuff on the search. Like it cannot allow after 60 minutes, the search is prematurely finalized by Splunk. Does this still apply those configurations?
Let me see. Could you still trying to figure out what so global limits that could cause finalization. So you're saying
Like I think there's limits.conf where you can actually, or enroll somewhere where you can actually say that the searches cannot run longer than 60 minutes, for example. And if they do, then Splunk will just finalize them and finish them up.
oh, I see. Okay, so for limits that will actually terminate jobs.
Right.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. I would have to do some digging and possibly run some simulations to see what the behavior is there. I would assume if it's a global limit that Splunk would respect that and it would kill it even if it did move it to a slower pool. Yeah, I would just suspect that the workload management piece doesn't override some of those global limits, given that global sort of that higher in the chain hierarchy. But yeah, that would be something that I'd want to test. So
Okay.
yeah, I'll look to put that on the list and get that going at some point. Okay, let's see. Michael Stevenson asks, would the rules also apply to poorly optimized searches and dashboards? They would, yes. So any search that runs, so if a user steps into a dashboard, if it's traditional XML with search behind the different panels, then ad hoc searches would get dispatched and those workload management rules would apply. So if it was taking over a certain amount of time or matched on some of the terms and conditions, then yeah, those searches would definitely respect those workload management configs. And then also if they're saved scheduled searches like reports or accelerated reports, they would also be respectful of their proper workload management rules as well. So yeah, absolutely, it would be respected there. Okay, so back over to I'm in the monitoring console here. For Splunk Cloud users, you'll be able to find this type of monitoring console under apps and then cloud monitoring console. And then if you go under resource usage and then workload management, there's a few different dashboards that are key to monitoring workload management. One of them is overview, so you can get sort of a high-level overview of the different instances and the status. You know, is it supported? Is it enabled? And then just a high-level overview of what are the default pools? What are the pools that are defined here? And then you can take a look at resource usage for these different categories and pools. So good high level, just keeping pulse to see how things are aligning to the different pools and stuff. And then one of the other good dashboard components here is workload management monitoring. So this is going to show us what workload management is doing from an action perspective. So there were 19 searches moved to different pools. Here's the action that triggered. Of course, this would look a lot more colorful and have more dimensionality if this was a production environment with all sorts of different conditions and predicates. And I believe all this is pulling off of that log file that I was tailing. So yeah, this is looking for the internal index. Source type is WLM. And we're looking for, yeah, we're getting a distinct count on the search ID and by a few different fields. So yeah, this raw data here is just showing everything that workload management is doing. And so, yeah, like anything good in Splunk, you can create alerts or even reports or dashboards that are custom if you needed to correlate this data with user searches and underscore audit. There's all sorts of things that you can do with this information. You could, yeah, create alerts if there's an excess of actions that workload management's taking, or even lack thereof. So if workload management isn't doing anything, you could also get an alert. So many different ways you could slice and dice this data to make it useful for all sorts of different use cases. Yeah, so aside from this monitoring dashboard, there's another one for the admission control. Not to be confused with mission control, which is something totally different. So this one is simply monitoring the actions for the admission rule here. So if you're looking for, what's going on, what searches are just being stopped dead in their tracks, that'll be within this dashboard here. So you can see this rule here was hit. It's the only one that's configured. And you can see a little bit more information. And then of course, yeah, you could drill in any of these and get more information, create alerts, and all sorts of other good stuff with this data. Okay, let's see. Let me keep an eye on chat. I see a few new things coming in. Let's see here. Okay, is there any built-in easy way to find those searches that would now be broken by the workload management rules? Is there a way to assess the risk of enabling a certain rule before enabling it, workload management rules? Yeah, great questions, Arturo. So what I would recommend, and this is going to lead me into how we're seeing this best deployed in the field from a sort of best practices perspective. So let me bring up the slide and we'll walk through some of those, and then I can pivot back over into this environment here. So let me stop the share on that and get back over to this here. So we'll fast forward some slides. Yeah, so best practices that we're seeing in the field. So the question being, hey, how do we identify what searches that are occurring in the environment today might align to some of these workload management rules? And what we can do is comb through the audit index. So if you're not familiar, Splunk keeps a full audit log of all the searches that are executed, and those are written to index equal underscore audit by default. And so with the review of this audit index, there are fields in there that display the runtime of the search, so how long the search took to run. And then there's also a search field that gives the raw search that the user passed to Splunk. And I know that we're looking to make improvements on what all the data is that gets logged. So currently, we display verbatim what the user searched for, which is interesting because if there's things like macros or things that just aren't clearly laid out in SPL that we can pick from, so this would be, a macro for many different indexes. If we're looking at that search string, well, we don't really know what those indexes are, so we'd have to get clever in, maybe keeping things in KV stores or doing a REST against Splunk and passing it that macro to resolve what those indexes are. So it could get pretty messy. I know that we're looking to make improvements on that going forward, but if it's traditional search where you've got index and source type and maybe a few search strings and so forth, we can see what the users are doing and then how long those searches are taking. And then we can start to answer questions like, okay, are these users important? Have they taken training? What would the impact be if we decided to move some of these searches into a workload pool with less resources and it took them longer to run? So we can start to gauge that by reviewing the audit index. And I'll pivot back over there in a second. I can show you some SPL to start shaking some of that data out of the audit index. And in doing the review of the audit index, you'll start to see some red flag practices. If you haven't made a lot of adjustments to your environment today, you'll probably see some all-time, real-time searches, index equals star, and so forth. So, let me speed things up a little bit. Looks like we have 5 minutes left, so I'll go through some of these quickly here. So once we've identified the initial scope and we know, what some of these red flags are or how we want to start crafting some of these workload policies, we can set it up in a staging sort of manner where we communicate to a certain user base. Maybe we're targeting a specific user or a specific group or people that are searching a specific index. We can start with a narrow scope. We can communicate to them as to what they should expect. And we can have workload management display just a message at first. So if you recall the workload rules, we don't have to change pools or limit their resources. We could simply just display a message. And this is helpful in setting the stage for what will be coming next, which will be more enforcement. So the user, if they're doing something bad, will get a message. So that would be the first action there. And then from that, we can run a lot of analytics within cloud monitoring or monitoring console to identify what workload management was doing. So if users are doing something bad and they're getting a message displayed, we're going to see that data in the log files, and we can run analytics to see, okay, which users are getting that message, what is their search that they're doing, all those types of things, which will give us that feedback loop so that we know how to take further action. So as we start to take those data points and then roll them into production, we can then do some more communication, and then we can change the rules to be enforcing. So we can abort bad searches, we can move searches to different pools if that's the right action, and so forth. And then continue the feedback loop, continue running analytics on workload management, continue identifying searches and behaviors that we want to clamp down on, or send users to documentation so that they can get better. And then ultimately we'll get the best of both worlds. We'll have a more educated user base. We'll have sort of these catch-all types of rules or catch rules that if somebody is doing something bad, it's not going to affect everybody else. And yeah, with continuous feedback, it'll just keep getting better and better. So with that, I know we only have a few minutes left. I'm happy to spill over longer if everybody else wants to stay, if anybody else wants to stay on. But I do at some point, I want to bring this to a close and see if there's any questions. But let me just go over really quickly for just a minute or so, and we'll go over the audit index. This should only take a minute. So index equal underscore audit. So you'll need to have access to this index. It's an internal index, usually requires more elevated permissions and roles to be able to get to this index. Once we're here, we could do action equals search. And then there's all sorts of different fields that we can use to report on. So API start time, API end time. So this shows the time range of when the search was executed against. Let me see if there's, just as a quick example, let me find there should be a duration. see here, try to find that. So total runtime. Okay, so I could do something like type stats, count by total runtime, search, user, something like this. Should be pretty simple. I have my users here. I have total runtime. There's other things that I can weave into the mix here: API end time, API start time, so on and so forth. And this, so let me paste this in the chat. This is probably a good start, and then you can incorporate other fields into this that'll help refine or help you with identifying potential candidates for workload management. So I'll go ahead and drop a link here to, or a search rather, in chat. So hopefully that's useful. Yeah, so with that, I'll just go ahead and stop sharing and open it up to see if there's any questions or anything that anybody would like to talk about. Just go ahead and put it on this. And then I'll bring up the chat here.
What would you say are some of the immediate challenges an organization might face by implementing workload management?
Yeah, good question. So I think that some of these some admins out there see this as a great tool to be able to employ some sort of policing, if you will. And the biggest challenges that we've seen is some admins being too aggressive out of the gate, in that they know what best practices are. They're very familiar with Splunk, but when they apply some of these policies, some of the users that maybe are new or haven't taken the training or don't have those good practices, that just want their data, are getting stopped out of a bunch of their searches, or they're just taking much longer than they would have expected. So there's a little blowback from the admins being a little too aggressive in implementing these rules. So yeah, the approach of setting up a proper stage environment where you're not taking action, but rather letting the users know that they're not aligning to best practices and giving them resources to get them better, is usually the better approach, and then start to take actions.
Okay.
So
that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, let me ask a question, everybody. Is anybody using workload management today? And if so, how's it going, and what's the experience been like so far? Everybody must be doing something else, or end of day, people must be drinking or something.
I think you explained it very well, John. If anybody has questions, would they be able to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if you have any questions, I'll go ahead and drop my email in the chat here.
Hey, John, Jeff, you go ahead. A question. I don't know if you answered this one yet, but can you enable this even if you don't change your pricing model from ingest?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, workload management is available for ingest or workload licensing models. So yeah, whether you're cloud on ingest or on premise on different licenses, absolutely. Yeah, you just need to be on version 8.x plus is the guidance, and then on a version of Linux that we support using systemd is preferred there. So yeah, absolutely. Cool. And yeah, if there's any questions or thoughts or anything else outside of workload management, we welcome anything Splunk related. So yeah, if you're stuck on a search or if you're looking at some app on Splunk base or whatever it is, happy to open up the discussion as broad as one can imagine. So anything is welcome, as long as it's not politics.
Perfect. Well, thank you, John, for speaking to the user group. Really appreciate you taking your time to educate us on workload management.
Yeah, definitely. I see a fun question in the chat here. How do I find an orphaned object? So that is a good question. There's let me see if I can find it, and if I can, I'll share it. There's within settings. There's an area that you can find those objects. Let me see where that is. So let me share my screen here.
Yeah. Nowadays, I'm trying to find the solution for the orphan object, which is belongs to disabled user, but I couldn't find in the usual way all documents saying look at orphan object in all configurations, but it's not showing there. I think it's a kind of not shared or some private object.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that so if you've got a user that created an object in their user directory, which a lot of objects when created within the web UI of Splunk will default to the user space. You should be able to go to settings, all configurations, and then there's a reassign knowledge objects. And you should be able to click on this orphan button here and then open it up to all. So these are all the places where the objects would exist. So you have types and you have what app context. And so if you have orphaned objects, they should appear here. And then you should be able to select them and change the owner and even location, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, you're right. In here, I found a couple of other objects and transferred the owner, but it's still a complaint about some saved search. So I assuming it's kind of the private search, saved search. So is that the option to remove from Etsy users and username directory if that user already left the company and we don't need anymore? If we remove all the users, 5 folders under Etsy directory, is that a problem, do you think?
Yeah, so good question. So can you just go ahead and remove the Etsy user directory? You can. I would recommend some sort of audit be performed to identify the value of what objects the user created in their private namespace, and see if that would lend itself to use cases that others within the organization can use. Oftentimes folks are making private searches and dashboards that they use and keep private for whatever reason. And then if they leave the company, all that great work that they've done sits in their user directory, and it's not going to be accessible by anybody else until it's either made public or moved into the right namespace within Splunk. So yeah, you could definitely remove the directories if the objects within are of no value, or maybe they're duplicates off of a dashboard that's already made public, those types of things. So yeah, you could go into ops Splunk Etsy users, and then in the user directory, whatever app context it's in, there should be like a savesearches.conf in there. So you can go in there and you could take a look at what the searches are, and if they're not useful, you can go ahead and delete them.
I haven't seen the save search conf file, any of them, but still it's the messages are saying something about that, so I decided to remove that and take the copy and remove that directory. Let's see if I get, because it's getting every day at 10 p.m. So I need to confirm one day later. I can only confirm after one day. It's getting me angry.
So if I heard you right, you weren't able to find the savesearches.conf, or?
Yes, correct. I haven't seen any save search, but there's some other UI conf folders.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, if you're seeing orphaned objects, sometimes they're hiding in non-traditional Splunk apps. So have you tried doing a find on like if you do a find.name savesearches.conf, have you traversed all the different directories under the user to see if save searches maybe is hanging out somewhere that's non-traditional?
I do have a list of the files, but I don't have that file, the save search conf. Not too much.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and drop this into the chat.
So it needs to be in under the users directory, right? Users and the accounts, user account, not the other places. Because
Yeah.
each
yeah,
account has different their own.
Yeah, so if you go to ops Splunk Etsy users, yeah, you'll get all the various user directories in here, and then you can run the find command to run through all the various user directories to see if there's a savesearches.conf in there. Yeah, I pasted that in the Zoom chat in case that's helpful.
Production.
All right. How about anybody else? Any other Splunk topics? Any questions? Anything you might be stuck with, or anything else? Right, and I know that we do have a user group Slack channel. I know that we have a channel for SoCal. I don't think there's been much activity there, but yeah, if you all are on the Splunk user group Slack, there's a SoCal user group channel that some of us sit in, and if there's anything that ever comes up that you're interested in bouncing off of us, we're more than happy to help out there.
Yep. I just put the link to the user group in the chat as well. So if folks want to join that, feel free. And if you have any challenges with that, you can, reach out to John or myself. I'll put my email in the chat as well, and we can help you out with joining that. But I think at this time we'll probably end the user group for right now, and we'll see you at the next one. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. But thanks, John, for presenting. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just pasted a link in the chat there to sign up for the user groups. It's just a quick Google form that you got to fill out, and then access should be granted to join Slack. So yeah, thanks everybody for stopping by. Hope you took away something good from workload management, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you guys next time. So thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.